Today's episode of What's on Your Bookshelf is brought to you by Insignia Training Partners, the leaders in outsourced L&D talent and resources. Insignia is a full-service learning and development company that provides L&D talent to design, develop, and deploy your training solutions. Insignia specializes in providing the right resources for your projects at a fraction of the cost as opposed to bringing on new full-time employees. This includes fractional Chief Learning Officer services for enterprise training strategy, instructional designers to develop your training content and materials, facilitators to deliver in-person or virtual training to your staff, LMS administrators to manage the process, virtual training producers to make sure your virtual training is engaging and effective, and coaches to support the learning after training is completed. If you don't have a training department, that's okay. Insignia can be your bolt-on training department. With Insignia, you get dedicated resources providing fractional services by specialists in their field. Whether it's onboarding new hires, upskilling your team, or ensuring compliance, Insignia designs impactful programs that stick. Visit insigniatraining.com to discover their full range of services and to schedule a free consultation. Insignia is your partner for training success.
Welcome to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Rousseau and Samantha Powell.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. This is a life and leadership podcast where we are living out loud the pages of the books that are on our bookshelves. The book that we're exploring is called The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. My name is Denise Rousseau. I'm here with my co-host and friend, Sam Powell. And today we are talking about how to pay attention. I think that's an interesting word, pay attention. So I'm curious how this episode will go together, but I'm happy to be here with you today, Sam.
I'm happy to be here today with you too, especially on this topic, because I know that mindfulness is something that you really practice in your life. And I mean, you've brought that into meetings I've been in with you in the business world. You talk about, things you do in this space in your own life. And it's interesting. Like, I think about this as, the way she did this. This is October. This is she's in the United States. So this is the fall, the autumn time of the year. This is very much a time of year when we're slowing down, right? Like the spring is all about new and blossoming and life, and the summer is all about just the heat and the energy and, that kind of stuff. But as you move to fall, there is something naturally reflective about it. As you're preparing for winter, you're preparing for that dormant hibernation type vibe that I like October for mindfulness. As I think about for me, I'm expecting a baby in October, but I love this thought process of entering that time of year with purpose, with attention to the present, to the moment you're in. And for me, this will be a big transition. And you can easily go through that, the newborn phase of it's just constant cycle of feeding in diapers and not sleeping and blah, 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 blah. But slowing it down and being mindful, and all of that. I like the way this one fell for her, as far as which month this one ended up in.
That's a super interesting way to think about this, because if you are thinking about a calendar year starting in January you set out with your resolutions from whatever it was you didn't do the year before. By February, you're going to drop most of those. And then in Q3, at the very beginning of Q3, maybe the end of Q2, but around the June, July timeframe, people are doing a look back and a look forward. What did I get done the first 6 months of the year? What am I looking forward to the last 6 months of the year? But you're right, October begins Q4 in business, and that's a time of slowing down, maybe a time of reflecting, unless you're in sales, when you're really gearing up to make sure everything you didn't do in the beginning of the year gets done. And so the way that she described it is she says that what was important to her about having some mindful time in this month was the cultivation of conscious, non-judgmental awareness. And so I think you were mentioning maybe in the last episode something about how Dan was saying something about, are you going to start to be like a vegetarian and a hippie and all of this stuff after reading these books? But mindfulness to me is is an interesting concept of, is it really to make your mind full, or is it to make your mind empty, or is it to make your mind healthy? And I think it's probably that last one, which is, what are the thoughts we're thinking? What are the beliefs we're holding on to? What are the things that drive what we do in our life with the actions or inactions, like in all of these months that we've had these happiness projects up until now? And what are the results or the outcomes we have in life? And how can you let go of some sort of personal attachment to the outcomes, but simply without attachment, non-judgment toward the fact that you're living out your life? I saw this article the other day, Sam, and it was saying something that was extraordinarily mindful to me, which was, think about this. You will likely only have, if you take the average lifespan of a person, let's call it 80 years, you will only have 80 birthdays. You will only have 80 summers. You will only have 80 whatever in your life. What are you doing with them? And I can think back even just not long ago, we were going to be celebrating my dad's 80th birthday. And it was an interesting day because it was the one year there was no fanfare. There was nobody around except for me and my mom and my son. And it was almost like this sort of, not depressed, because that's not the right word, but a low energy experience. I called him that day, that morning, and I said, Dad, where do you want to go for dinner? Well, I don't give a crap. Well, I don't care where we go. I'll eat a hamburger. I'll eat a bologna sandwich. It was like this sad sort of like, I don't think he was expecting there to be a big thing, but he also was taking it to say, I don't care, but not like, oh, I don't care. Let's go anywhere. It was almost like, I don't even care. And it got me to really think deeply about what is going on in my dad's mind that is filling his mind to say that a day that we should be honoring and celebrating and cherishing, 80 years completed on this spinning globe, was coming to fruition. So I ended up taking him to a nice dinner with my mom. And it was just me and my mom and dad. That's all that went. And it was kind of like this really meaningful time, because I was sitting there and what I was thinking about was my last 50 plus years of having these experiences with my dad. And I don't really know what my dad was exactly thinking in those moments, but I can tell you that we left his birthday dinner with him smiling and laughing and having a good time. But I think that the whole point of what I experienced is that if I had not taken the time while I was sitting there and what I did after I left him to think about my thoughts, I would have lost that core memory, and maybe it just would have been like another day going out to dinner at a restaurant. It's about going deep into your thinking and finding some sort of benefits. And so Gretchen does say that scientists point out that mindfulness calms your mind, it elevates your brain function, it gives you clarity and vividness to present experience, and it may help people break unhealthy habits, and it can soothe troubled spirits and lift people's moods. It reduces stress and chronic pain. It makes people happier, less defensive, and more engaged with others. And you're right, Sam. I love mindfulness and the idea of paying attention to thoughts. I try to do that every day through my prayer time. So no matter what your belief system is, mindfulness is about your time with just you, the most important person there is to you in this world, and taking the time to think about what you're thinking about.
Yeah. And as she kicks off this chapter, she talks about, when you think about mindfulness, when you think about bringing your attention to the present moment, to, the things that are happening to you, right? Like people were giving her recommendations. Oh, you should meditate. Oh, you should try this. And she tried lots of different things. But at the end of the day, it really came down to what appeals to you, right? She was like, meditation just isn't her thing. For some people that it absolutely is. For other people, that's not it. But mindfulness is that practice of bringing attention to what is happening right here, right now, without judgment, right? It's not like, oh, I'm feeling like, oh, like my chest feels tight. I just feel like this emotion, and then I have to judge that and I have to fix that. It's not that mindfulness is what is happening right now. Like it's a curious kind of environment for you to just really sit and do that. And she, like her ways, we didn't talk about this, but her 4 things were meditate on koans, examine true rules, stimulate the mind in new ways, and keep a food diary, which I just love that keep a food diary was in there. And we'll talk about that as we get to it. But what she's really trying to do is to get herself off the hamster wheel of go, 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 just living life and into what can I do to really, like you said, like bring your attention to the things that you're doing, right? Bring attention to the things that you're thinking. And a lot of people do, like you said, prayer, things like that. Some people do that while they're exercising. It's like, this is where my body is occupied. And so my mind is now free to think about everything. That's why people like shower thoughts are such a thing, right? Because it's this repetitive action that you don't really have to think about. If you're an adult and you've taken thousands and thousands of showers in your life, you don't have to think about what you're doing. And so your mind ends up wandering to where you go and you just follow that train. You allow that to happen and you think about what is really going on without the anxiety of what's happening in the future, without the, oh my gosh, what's happening in the past. It's what's happening right here, right now.
Had you ever heard of these koans?
I hadn't. This was a new concept for me. And I don't even after I read this, I'm not sure I 100% get it, to be very honest. But it's like, you tell me if I'm wrong here, but like basically it's just these thoughts that you can't logic through. Like it's these little sayings like Robert Frost's "The best way out is always through." "We set out to be wrecked" by J.M. Barrie. Like it's these thoughts that you contemplate and you think about, but you can't it just expands your thought process. Like it expands the way you need to think, because it's not like 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 could equal 5. And you're like, well, how could that happen? Like, what does this really mean? Why am I even looking at this? Like, it's this contemplative, weird little saying, sentence, whatever. I had not heard of these at all. And I don't even know, I've come across stuff like this. It's like that, tell me again what you just said, or let me reread that. Like I've experienced it. And I think about it. It does help me expand, but I don't know. This was an interesting one for me.
I had never heard of it either. And she was talking about how monks use it to let go of reason as they try to become more enlightened. And she said these fragmented thoughts kept interrupting her mind because they would float through her mind at weird times of the day, like if she was at the subway or staring at a computer screen. And she said there was one she says it's one of the most famous ones, I guess, and I'd never heard of these before, but she says the most famous koan is 2 hands clap and there is sound. So, okay. Yeah. But then it goes after that and says, well, then what is the sound of just 1 hand?
I read that and I made that, I just moved my hand to where I made the sound. I was like, there is a sound. So I was like, I figured it out, but it's the art of contemplating that thought process, right? I think it kind of reminds me of if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound, right? It's the thought, it's the act of contemplating that, which if you're somebody who is would think of yourself as a thinker, as somebody who is maybe a little more philosophical, this could be a good it would be an interesting exercise. And I think we all come across little riddles like this here and there. I think the internet's got some good memes in this space. Yes. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, but kind of breaking that thought process of, I'm trying to figure something out to I'm just trying to contemplate. I don't know, it's an interesting experience.
She says that it basically was helping her to think about thinking. So for example, I suppose if you're at work, if you are, let's say that you are struggling with something, I guess the question you could ask would be something like, is it true? I'll give you a real life example. We have some mutual friends who have spent more than a year every day going to work, wondering if that day is going to be their last day at work. Is it true? We don't know. But imagine this, 8 to 10 hours of your day has invested your thinking time in worry, in fear, in anxiety, in a story that we make up in our minds that may or may not be. So what if you could take the question mark? This is the topic of a book I'm working on right now. What if you could take that question mark and replace it with an exclamation point? So instead of thinking, oh, what if I lose my job today? If you turn it upside down and you say, what if I don't lose my job today? What could my day be like if I had the best day ever? Who could I invest my time with? Who can I share gratitude with? What's something I could do that would make someone feel better about what I brought to the table today? And so to me, that's really what it was about, which was examining your thinking for the things that are true. I think there's a quote. I'm going to say that I think that it is from the Bible, and I'm going to misquote it badly. So sorry for this, but it basically says that when you are thinking on your thoughts, think of things that are true, and think of things that are lovely, and think of things that have purpose and meaning. If you have the power over your thoughts and you're thinking about opposite of those things, things that are untrue, things that are unloving, things that don't have a purpose, things that are harmful, things that are not bringing you closer to your passions, potential, and purpose in life, then the residence that they're taking up in your head are removing the ability for you to have all those other true and lovely thoughts that should be living there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we all need ways to like reset that thought process too. Like, like I've got a couple tricks up my sleeve that it's like, ooh, my thoughts are going in a bad direction, in a direction I don't want them to go into. My like I don't know, I'm unmotivated, I'm whatever. And it's like, okay, well, what's my bag of tricks that I have to do that? And like for her, it was these koans. For some people, it's a meditation, right? Like I really like the Insight Timer app because it's free and it has everything from like less than 1 minute to longer, exercises. And it's different types of like mindfulness specific stuff or like actual meditations or whatever. So like there's things like that. Or just music, right? Like some people, it's like, I love to turn on music. And it's like, I just need to change my mood. Like, I just need something to jump me into that, right? To take me into that. But you've got to be able to recognize, and that's a lot of what mindfulness is being able to recognize where I'm at right now, right? Like, what is happening? What is going on? What is true? What is the reality of my situation? And then what do I want it to be is kind of your next step. And then what's that bag of tricks you have to pull yourself into it? Like when I feel unproductive working from home, doing whatever, I throw on a podcast that helps me flip myself into that brain of like, ooh, inspiration and movement. And then it's like, okay, now I'm going to bang out a whole day of stuff. Right. But like everybody needs those things that work for them. And that's what she's saying is like these koans were one of those things for her that helped her think about her thinking. What are the things that help you bring you into yourself to recognize stuff? Sometimes it's just a reminder on your phone that goes off 4 times a day that says, how are you? What's the feeling? What's the emotion in your body? Right? Like just something that helps bring you into that space and then can help you break out of a potentially negative or just neutral cycle you don't want to be in, right? You just want to be in something different.
Have you ever noticed that you've driven somewhere and you think to yourself that you don't really remember driving there?
And how dangerous that is, that happens all the time. But yeah, that's exactly it. And that happens all the time in life, right? Where it's like, I completed an entire activity. I took an entire shower. I did whatever. I put all the dishes away and I don't even really remember doing it, right? And it's because your brain isn't in your present moment, right? It's not with you. It's in the future. It's in the past. It's not now. And that's where you've got to bring your attention back to. Like that's what when she says pay attention in October, that's what she's really talking about. And I like where she took this, right? From this, like, okay, she has this koans activity that like really makes her think about her thinking, but then she goes into examining the rules. And if I were to write a book, this is one of the books I will write at some point in my life, is about examining the rules in your own life, right? So she calls these examine the true rules. But for her, it's examples of things like my children are my most important priority. Get some exercise every day. I know as much as most people, whenever possible, choose vegetables, right? It's like, what are these rules that we live by, these true rules we live by in our life? And let's take a look at those. Do they serve us? Are they conflicting? Did they serve us in the past, but don't serve us in our present, right? Or won't serve us in the future we're trying to get to? Like, I think this is such an important mindful activity for people to do frequently in their life of, why did I do that thing? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What rules were playing? What roles was I playing? Right? Whose rules was it? And, like, this is a great one. This is what I love the guilty emotion for. Guilty is one of the feelings that helps us realize we need to examine rules. Because the question you got to ask yourself is, what rule was broken, right? When I'm guilty, it means I have broken a rule. That is the feeling. That's the cause and effect. What rule have I broken? Whose rule is it? And do I want to play by that rule?
Yes.
Right? And we see this all the time. And there's so much time where we're carrying around this guilt. And it's like, well, why am I guilty? Well, the question really to ask yourself is, what rule is broken? Right? I should be this, but I was this. I should have done this, but I did this. This should have happened, but it didn't. What rule is that? And then how to do that. And so where guilty is not normally a positive emotion, I love when guilt pops up in my life because it lets me think about the rules. And I'm all about the rules are made up and the points don't matter, right? Like, that's my big thing. And I loved this examination. I loved the rules that she found for herself, that she found that other people told her, were their rules. I thought this was an interesting one, and interesting in the context of mindfulness.
Well, she shared that when you have all these rules, depending on who created them or how they were broken, she said several of them were difficult to balance. But I had highlighted a rule that she learned from her mom. And that rule was that the things that go wrong often make the best memories. And somehow that sentence for her was very comforting and true. And when you think about that, she was saying, if something went wrong, that it was a good lesson. And how would that be comforting? Because when things go wrong in the moment, you don't feel very comforted, but it's almost like John Maxwell's book, Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn.
Yep.
Yeah. And so it's in the learning that we're growing. And so she goes on, like you said, to talk around things like rules that are unhelpful, like always say hello. What would my mother do? Don't be bored. Change is good. Change can be good, but change could also not be good. So she goes on with all this list of these things that we think to be true. And so she said she also picked up a helpful, true rule from her sister who told her that people succeed in groups. And I found that one to be interesting because I have worked remotely for most of my career, and I consider myself extremely introverted, and I don't get energy being around a lot of people. And yet, everything that you hear about anything about success in life and in business entails collaboration, communication, cooperation, and connection with other people.
Yeah. And it's funny I've heard you say that about yourself, I don't know how many times, but I just don't have that same perspective on you. And my argument is your calendar is full. And it is full of you talking to people, engaging with other people. I think that introversion, extroversion, and all that kind of stuff, it's just, I don't know, whatever the rules are, the box you've got there, doesn't feel right to me, because I don't think of you as, I agree with the thing of we work best in groups. I believe in collaboration. I believe that, is it John Maxwell that says, I forget who it is, but you might be the smartest person in the room, but you're never smarter than all the people in the room, right? I firmly believe that's one of my rules of that's definitely true, right? There's no way it's not. And I think that that interaction with people, just because you're not sitting physically in a big group of people, just because you're not physically going out there to spend all this crazy extroverted energy, doesn't mean you're not in collaboration with people, right? Like you're not engaged, you're not connected with the people. Like you are one of the most connected people I've ever met. Like you know everybody, you talk to everybody. I don't know how many conversations you and I've started where I was talking to this person and you need to meet my friend who does this. And I'm like, why do I need to meet your friend? And you're like, you just do. And then surprise, I did. Like it was just a nice conversation, some like wonderful connection. But I don't know. To me, I think this is kind of part of that, like unbreaking the rules, breaking apart the rules that we think we live by. We think that being extroverted means you're engaging in a certain way. We think that you're either extroverted or you're introverted. And I don't think so. Like, I'm perfectly content sitting on my back porch by myself, reading a book for hours. I'm also perfectly content engaging with my friends for hours. Both of those things give me energy. So where does that leave me, right? In this binary setup, right? So I don't know. It's funny. You say that all the time about yourself, but I don't know. I don't think it's that black and white. I think you are one of the most connected, most engaged people. I don't know that I would call that extroversion really. It's something different, something more complex than are you introverted or are you extroverted?
My friend calls it ambivert. She says you're an ambivert, which is sort of like that flexing between the two, I think. And I agree with you. If I think back in my career, I went to Universal Studios last weekend with a friend of mine and with Vincent. And it was just such a beautiful time because Vincent has become friends with her son. Now, she doesn't live near us. She lives probably about 3 hours away, I think. And she and her husband came up last minute, no notice, and just said, "Hey, what are you guys doing Saturday?" and it just happened to be a random Saturday that we had nothing to do, which is extraordinarily rare in my family.
Yep.
So she said, "Come to Universal. We're going to be there." I met this person, my friend Kim, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe 6 jobs ago, just to date it, 1998, I think is what we fell on because we couldn't even remember the year that we started working together. But sometime in the 90s, in the 1900s, I met my friend Kim. And so we were talking about how the things about the experiences that we make with those that we love are what matters. What brought us together was a job. But what kept us together was beyond the tasks of the job. And as she and I were talking about it, I was mentioning to her that of all the jobs that I've had, it's always been about the people that I worked closest with that I appreciate the most. And some of these people have become what I call family, friends that are family to me. Yep. I've been to their weddings. I've seen their children go through different stages in their life, and they've seen my kids do the same. And there's just something about that if you're going to spend that much time at work, that you work on the relationships that you have with those that you are around. But it's also important for you to find yourself in experiences or places where your heart and your mind are both stimulated. And this is sort of where Gretchen goes next, where she talks about how to be more mindful, she had to use her brain in different and more unfamiliar ways to enhance the experience of the moment that she was in. And so your frame of mind, I loved how she kind of put that wording, because when you think of a frame, like a picture frame, the frame of your mind, you decide what goes into the frame. And so she said that she was posting these sticky notes around her apartment about the frame of mind she wanted to cultivate. So she was deciding what was in the picture. So right next to her laptop, she has this sticky note that says, "I am focused and observant." But in her bedroom, she has a sticky note that says, "Quiet your mind." And then she has something in her bathroom that says, "Tender and lighthearted," and she goes on. And Olivia, my daughter, she made me this beautiful handmade painting. She's super creative. And it has all of these thoughts and verses and thinking and mindful examples all over the painting. And I decided to hang it in my bathroom. And she was so upset when I put it in the bathroom. She's like, "You have all these other things in the living room prominently displayed, but you put this in the bathroom." And the thing I said to her was, "Olivia, The bathroom is the room that I go in the most during the day when I don't have to be thinking about doing. I'm not watching TV in the living room. I'm not cooking dinner in the kitchen. I'm not doing laundry in the laundry room. It's a place where my mind can actually focus. And because I go in there every single day, multiple times a day, I know probably TMI, but when you have a bathroom, the reality is we all go in them. And so this thing that's in there, when I'm there, I see it, I notice it, I look at it, I read it, I ponder it, I think about the things that are written there. And so for me, it's like that's my daily Post-it note, is that my daughter made me this beautiful thing. And so she just simply says that if you are looking for ways to help your brain think about your thinking, you have to put it in a place where you don't have distractions around your thinking.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And you just have to find those ways that do stimulate you in ways that work for you specifically, right? And sometimes that is doing something a little bit different, or putting things in places where, hey, I'm in the right frame of mind to engage in the way that, that I want to do. But yeah, that's what brings mindfulness into it, right? Like, can I engage purposefully? Can I shake myself out of the thing that I'm in? And I know we're running close on time, but the last thing she says, and I want to say one thing about this, is the food diary was one of the things that she did.
Yes.
Which was like, she's like, I'm not trying to be on a diet. I'm not trying to do whatever, but it was bringing consciousness to your eating. And I did some mindfulness type of program one time where they did talk about eating, and because eating, and you and I did this in our retreat too, of like mindful eating and things like that, but we eat all the time, right? It's the same things, like we go to the bathroom all the time, we take a shower, often, right? Like, these are the regular things that we do in our life, and eating is one of those things we do repetitively multiple times a day, hopefully, right? And in that, it's, don't just blow through the activity, right? Don't just be like, oh, I'm going to eat this on the go, right? Like I remember one year where I used to eat my breakfast in the car as I drove in, right? Like, that was just the hecticness, craziness of life. But taking the moment to really bring your attention to what you're doing. One, it's a great way to bring consciousness to what you are eating. Like for her with the diary of like, oh gosh, I've been eating this thing I don't really want to eat, or like I reach for this snack before I know. We talked about that a lot of Atomic Habits, but there is something about eating that is an easy grab for people who are trying to find a way to be mindful. It's like, put the phone down, turn the TV off, and just focus on your plate, on your food. Sit there and really like chew and swallow, go through the sensations of eating. And you'll be surprised at how that changes what you're doing, right? It's not scarf everything down because we can't do this, right? Like we got to hurry, we got to rush. So, well, like all that sort of good stuff. It's just bringing the attention. But I think that, like, I mentioned this one because, we could probably brush over it. But for somebody who is trying to find an easy grab in the mindfulness space, I think your meals are actually one of the spaces that are really easy to grab that. If you stop rushing through it and start focusing on the actual act of eating your meal, that is a mindfulness activity that's a very easy win for people.
I would love to talk with this more with you as listeners, because this actually is a really extraordinarily life-changing thing that you can do for yourself. I have a friend that wrote a book about this, and I'll share that book. Scott, remind me that I have to share this book with you. My friend Wangi wrote this book about mindful eating and how it helped him to be able to maximize the health he has in his life. It is mind-blowing to read this book and start incorporating it into your own life. This is a topic that I know we're out of time to discuss today, but if you are someone who is looking for ways to be more mindful, reach out for a discovery call with one of us. One of my absolute most favorite exercises I do with my coaching clients is to have them close their eyes and to imagine what they want their life to be like, or to imagine a scenario that doesn't actually exist, so that they could start to create tangible, realistic, real action plans that get them to that place. It's extraordinarily effective. So if that's something that you're thinking about needing or wanting, reach out to us. Scott has ways for you to reach us in the show notes. But for today, this has been yet again another incredible conversation. My name is Denise Rousseau, and on behalf of my friend Sam Powell, who I'm so grateful for and do get to spend some mindful moments with, this has been another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf.